Hey everybody, welcome to CKAMAs. As someone who identifies as being both a left-brained and right-brained thinker, our guest has found herself coming back to the intersection of science and education after spending some time working at a digital studio. After graduating with a science degree, she spent a year teaching middle school students before she found a love for the art of software development. Partway through her software engineering track at Kenzie Academy, the very first UX engineering cohort was founded, and she quickly pivoted as it would complement her talents and lend to the holistic approach to development that she so long sought after. Now, she uses her hard-earned skill set to give back to underrepresented youth by teaching UX design to high school students, beautifully combining her love of art, science, and education in service of others. Please turn your cameras on, unmute yourselves, and help me in welcoming one of Kenzie Academy's incredibly talented UX engineers, Mya Williams. Welcome, Mya.
Hey, that was quite the introduction. I'm so flattered. How are you all this evening?
Doing great.
Awesome, awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really impressed by your tenacity to truly find work that fulfills you, from Teach for America to literally just stopping a whole boot camp track and pivoting to another. A lot of people fall prey to this sunk cost fallacy that you've already invested all of this time and all of this effort that you may as well finish it. What gave you the courage to make these jumps?
Well, specifically speaking to switching my boot camp tracks, that was it came pretty easy. I was originally in the software engineering track at Kenzie Academy, which is full stack development. And partway through, I decided to switch to UX design. When I decided to go to Kenzie, I was not too familiar with the actual specifics of different tech careers. I just knew that I wanted to be a developer of some kind. So definitely after being at Kenzie and being immersed in the tech life of Indianapolis as a whole, I kind of started seeing the different roles and seeing where I personally fit best. And for me, that was in a role that was more client facing and also had aspects of human interaction and also research, because I really like research. So for all those reasons, it was pretty easy to decide to switch to UX.
And so for the people that are on here that are kind of considering Kenzie, and they're kind of shopping around for different boot camps, could you kind of explain the difference between Kenzie's software engineering track and the UX engineering track, and how someone would know which one's right for them?
Yeah, so the software engineering versus UX track. So with the software engineering track, like I said, it's full stack development. So you do 6 months of front end, 6 months of back end. The UX design or the UX engineering track is different in they do 6 months of UX design followed by 6 months of front end development. So while they are different, they still have a very huge overlap, and that's at 6 months of front end. So it's pretty cool to, you're kind of able to, if you find that you're in one track and you might be better suited for another, there is that leeway to kind of switch if you need to. It's not too common for students to do that, but it definitely happens, and they're just as successful.
And how would you say that Kenzie particularly sets up its graduates well for the job search, or just the job in general?
So in addition to teaching the hard skills, the actual code and the actual design and the actual methods, They also have a separate curriculum called Kenzie Core, and it's all of the soft skills that are required as a part of getting a job. So like things like job interviewing, portfolio prep, resume building, because it's all different depending on which sector you're in. Like for instance, a business analyst resume will look way different than a designer's resume. So they go over like those specifics. They also do lots of interview prep. We have expert instructors that also work at Kenzie, and they work at Kenzie while also simultaneously working at their other roles. Like for instance, in UX, Wendy, she also works at Microsoft. We have Justine, who works at Google. We have Stuart, who works at some new, I think it's like Shopify, some shopping app type of thing. So it's like they're in the real world, and they're also like doing these mock interviews with us and giving us feedback. So it's very, very valuable.
So what does what does a UX engineer type of role looks like? I know that you do design and then also some development. What does that kind of look like?
So as a UX engineer, UX engineering is kind of like a big umbrella term, and there are many different roles within that, right? So as a UX engineer, you can specialize in things like UX research, where you have the role of going out into the world, finding out what people's problems are that need to be solved, creating a blueprint for the product that is about to be designed and things like that. You can also specialize in visual design. And with that, you're actually like making the actual interfaces that you will see on like Instagram or Yelp and things like that. The engineering aspect comes in because you also know how to develop things that you are creating. So while I'm a designer and I can create full prototypes, I also have that developer skill to where I can actually write functional code behind it and contribute to my team in that way as well. So it's kind of like you can kind of pick one of those and really hone in. There are people that are kind of like jacks of all trades. So the possibilities are pretty extensive.
It's awesome. For the people that are on this call tonight, I would love if you guys could use the raise hand feature when you have your questions, so that we can go ahead and start picking on people. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, or just unmute yourselves. And Mia is here as a resource for you all. And this is an AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. So go ahead and ask her anything. Do we have anyone that has a question at the moment? One question right now? Well, all right. So I guess I'll get a couple of people a little bit more time to think about their questions. So Nicholas Maxwell is a little worried about the financial side. Nicholas, did you have any particular questions that you wanted answered? Well, Mia, so yeah, go for it, Paul.
Well, the meat and potatoes of this thing are the creativity of the vehicles that we're going to present to people or design for people. What are the languages that are prevalent in that regard? Is it just online? Is it something else that has to do with databases? What's involved here? So we get a full picture of what we're going to be utilizing. Thank you.
So your question is about tools that you'll use as a UX engineer?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So with UX, there are a lot of tools that teams use. It pretty much varies by team. However, generally speaking, the most common and popular design tool today is called Figma. And I can write that in the chat if you remind me. With Figma, you can create high fidelity mock-ups of designs. You can also prototype within that program as well. And it's also, the good thing about Figma is that it's web-based and it's collaborative. So if you're working in a team, you can see someone's edits in real time. So that's why it's really popular. In terms of programming languages, if you are a developer as a UX engineer, HTML and CSS are the most important by far. Sorry, my dog is running around in the background. But with HTML and CSS, you're going to be, it's essentially like the aesthetics of the website. So all of the cool things that you see and that you created in your Figma page, having it in HTML, CSS makes it so it's functional. And then in addition to that, JavaScript is also pretty important, not nearly as important as the CSS, I would say, because some UX engineers only go as far as that HTML, CSS. But if you go further, then you would learn JavaScript. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome.
So what does that kind of progression look like when you're actually going through that track of, so there's like certain fidelities of prototypes that you tend to learn. So before, you know, you do a full-fledged Figma like prototype that's super high fidelity, there's like some wireframing. Do you mind walking through like the learning process and then how you could actually apply that to a project and when those phases actually fit into the whole product development cycle?
Yeah, so I think it might be easier if I just explain like the UX design process. I think that'll answer your question. And then I'll tell you how Kenzie kind of like does the curriculum to that, that type of setup. So essentially for the UX process, it always starts with a problem. What problem are you trying to solve? And that's kind of where that UX research person will come in, or just all around UX engineer if you're a generalist. So you're going to research like what problems are people having. You can do that through many ways: user interviews, actual data, Google Analytics, tons of things, etc. And then also researching the market as well. So then with all of that, you're able to come up with a main problem to solve. And then with that, you're able to kind of think of MVP goals. And MVP stands for minimal viable product. So it's essentially like, what features are you going to have for V1 of your product? So after I'm doing my research, I am looking at the market and my competitors to see what's already out there, what people are doing, how it's working, and also how it's not working. And then all of that information can kind of help me and my team brainstorm ideas for our product and how it's going to set itself apart from what's already out there. Or if nothing out there exists, how it's going to come about. So after brainstorming with your team, that is when you start to think of your actual MVP goals. What features are going to be included? What specific things are we going to have for our users? So then after you think about the things that you want to include, that's kind of where the low fidelity designs begin. So with this, you're doing like paper and pencil, it's very bare bones. And you're thinking of the main things that your users need. So you're here sketching your screens. You know that you have to have like an onboarding page. You know that you have to have so many pages of content. And then you're taking all those pieces of paper, moving things around, testing them also with users again, with that pen and paper, seeing what they like, seeing what doesn't work. And then once you have enough data, that's when you start your high fidelity design phase. And that's where like tools like Figma will come in. And then once you're doing that, you have your high fidelity mockups, and then you're able to prototype those also in Figma. And with a prototype, it's essentially a functioning, not a functioning app, but it's like essentially like pictures and screen grabs of what the final product will look like. And you can navigate through it with the use of like hotspot buttons. So then once you have your high fidelity, you can take that and test it with user groups, and then getting more feedback. What needs to change? Are users getting confused at any steps? Are they getting lost? Is the product intuitive? Is it setting out to solve its problem? If all those answers are yes, then as a design team, it's time to start development. So you start to collaborate with your development team. And then that's kind of how the ball gets rolling for the product to actually start to be produced. And then you're constantly working back and forth with your dev team, always testing, doing more user testing, doing bug testing, making sure your products are accessible for people with disabilities, all of that stuff. So yeah, basically as the UX person, you are making sure that there is life in the product, and that people want to use it, right? So it's pretty much like how the UX process goes. If that kind of makes sense. Does that make sense?
No, totally, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that there's like you mentioned, like being the left brain and the right brain, like there's a ton of like overlap in different you know, situations where you get to use the more creative side, and then sometimes you'll, you know, deep into analytics with you know, getting all of the data that you need. And it seems like a pretty awesome like coupling of both strengths. So it looks like
it's really great. It's like depending on the day and depending on the project, you could be doing literally research all one day. You can be testing a group of 20 children one day. I actually did that with one of our clients was Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they're launching an app for bigs and their parents. And they wanted to add a new functionality for the littles. So yeah, I was just in a room with 20 children all day, testing the app out with them. And then the very next day, I was in a boardroom trying to figure out which features we're gonna have. And then like a week later, I was setting up the database for that using, what was it? Node, which is a JavaScript framework. So it really varies from day to day. But also, what was the other part of your question? In terms of Kenzie, the way that the curriculum kind of goes for all of that, you'll have 2 big projects during your time as a UX student. Your first project is a solo project. It takes about 3 months. It's called Foundation. And you really break down each of those steps, and you really take your time to go through them, understand the concepts, all while you're creating your first app. And that takes literally about 3.5 months, just to make sure you have all of the basic concepts of UX design down. And then after that, you do your final project, and you do that one in a small group, and you essentially do the whole UX design process again, but you do it as a team. And that's more of a real world setting. And you have about a month to do that one, which is also very real world, because a lot of times UX designers get the short end of the stick when it comes to time. So Kenzie does a really great job at making it feel real world, while also not overwhelming you at the same time. So you come out with 2 full portfolio worthy projects, which is really good for 6 months.
So I think, Jared, you have a question? Go ahead and like unmute yourself, turn your camera on if you can. And yeah,
Hey,
how's it going, Jared?
Doing pretty good now. Hey, Mia. Trying to think about this. So with your UX design, you're a UX designer and a UX engineer or UX developer. Trying to think about how this would go. Would it? Sorry, hold on. Yeah. Oh no, not the park. Not that. Not that. That was me. I gotta go to the second one though. Sorry. Right at the time. I know. Very perfect timing. But so the UX design, UX developer, with that, like, how intensive of a program would you say that is from your experience compared to what you've heard, like as compared to a software or even data science? I'm not necessarily saying it's like easier, but I know each one has their own intensity. And would you recommend, if someone was to go for UX, would you recommend them still do like software mainly, so they at least have an idea of doing like the back end development?
Okay, so let me make sure I answer both of your questions here. So the first one was about, and also I apologize for the darkness. It's 8 o'clock here in Indianapolis.
My camera.
But so for UX versus data science versus software engineering, they're all very different. So it's hard to compare them directly. People, there are people that will struggle in each of those tracks for very different reasons. I'd say a person who is most successful in UX design, they are very kind of philosophical thinkers. They enjoy concepts of like psychology and sociology. They are okay with lots of failure and roadblocks, because that comes a lot, especially because you're client facing, or you're the most client facing person on your dev team, most likely.
Yeah.
So though, like things like that, people who are more perfectionists also tend to do well, just in a sense of like, sometimes you can be working on a design or even just a very specific feature for a very long time, and it can take like 4 iterations until you have it right. You know, it's a very gray type of field. Like there's no straight yes or no. It's all like a big maybe, like a question that you need to find out. In terms of like software, now that is very yes or no, right or wrong. Either your code runs or it doesn't type of deal. So people with that, very strong in the math and sciences. Not to say that like if you've never taken like physics 4, you can't do this. I say good at math and sciences just because of that critical thinking aspect, and the ability to problem solve. So I've found that like that's kind of the more common mindset there. And then with data science, I honestly don't know too much about data science, or I've worked with enough data scientists to give you like a very clear answer. But with data science, the learning curve for that one is different in a sense that like a lot of data scientists have to be proficient in like different programs, like computer programs. I'm trying to think of names like Tableau and things like that. Whereas like a developer, you're doing more coding of languages. Not to say data scientists don't also code languages, it's just kind of different as far as like the setting goes.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Awesome. And then what was your second question?
Shoot, now I'm trying to remember it. That's how sorry. Shoot. Dang. I think I lost it. I was supposed to try to make sure I heard you on the answer. And I apologize for going through a drive-through real quick, trying.
I think he was one, so that you covered the intensity part, right? And I think that the other was related to, I guess, learning backend if you needed to. Yeah.
Oh. So go ahead. What was that?
I was learning essentially like what you were saying. Would you recommend someone who wants to do UX still learn like the back end, like a software engineer?
Okay. No, I would not. Just because you'll never really be in a situation where you're a UX designer and also a full stack developer. If you ever are in that situation, the company is a scam and you should run because they're not paying you nearly enough for what you're doing. It's just not really, being a full stack developer is its own whole job. And even full stack developers specialize in either the front or the back end. So as like a UX engineer, you're specializing in UX and front end, whereas like a full stack is front and back end, but you'll never see someone that's all three of those.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Mya.
You're welcome.
So it looks like Riley has a question in the chat. So it says, going into this from ground zero, in particular attending Kenzie, what is the best advice you can offer as far as preparation for the UX course?
So to prepare. So I also had zero tech background before Kenzie. Disclaimer, my mom and brother were software engineers, but I did not know a doggone thing. I grew up playing music. So for me, it really helped to learn computer science basics. And that's just to kind of have a general idea of like the theory behind everything. As far as UX goes, I'd say it's also really good to start sifting through like Medium and even YouTube just for UX related content. And looking at UX case studies, especially on Medium. UX Collective is a really good Medium publication to follow. And they have a lot of good featured case studies. And a case study is basically like someone takes a problem, typically like a website, and then they'll do a redesign. So like a very popular case study is like Spotify redesign. And it's really good to just read through what people's thought process was, the reasonings behind their choices. And like I said, how UX is very gray. If you look for 5 different case studies on Spotify, you're gonna find 5 completely different end results. And like, yeah, it's really cool to see. So that's kind of the best way to kind of like see what UX people are like thinking, and then you can kind of start looking at things like that through whatever apps you use. So yeah, just start having like a designer's lens would be the best thing.
Great, thanks.
And so I think we have a couple of people that are also interested in learning about the like payment options with Kenzie. Would you mind giving like a brief rundown of what Kenzie offers and like how someone could, you know, get around to paying for their bootcamp?
Yeah, so Kenzie, they offer an income share agreement for people that are not familiar with an ISA. Essentially, you pay Kenzie a down payment. I believe, okay, don't quote me on whatever the down payment is. It used to be $1,000, but I think that they've lowered it since then. especially with events going on right now around the country. They are waiving it for people depending on their circumstance. So essentially, you pay a down payment, and then you go through your education. Basically, you're not paying anything up front. And then once you get a job at Kenzie, because we're in Indianapolis, once you get a job paying $40,000 or more, then that's when you start to pay back your education, and you pay 13% of your salary for 2 to 4 years, depending on your program. So if you're in a 6-month program, 13% for 2 years. If you're in the 12-month program, it's for 4. There's also a cap to that. So like, say you make a whole lot of money, it obviously wouldn't be fair to like pay 13% of your $1 million. So I think the cap right now, they recently lowered it, and I think it's 1.7 times the original tuition cost. So say you hit that like in 3 years, then you're finished paying your ISA. So it's like whichever comes first. If you pay tuition up front, it is $13,000 for the 6-month program and $24,000 for the full year. And then they also have like a payment plan, which I do not know the details to. So contact admissions for that one. But yeah, you have those 3 options. Does that make sense about the ISA?
Yeah, totally. And we also, for Nicholas and I guess iPhone, who doesn't have the name attached to their Zoom account at the moment, we do have a ton of resources as well within the app. I can go ahead and contact you both individually. iPhone, you're going to have to give me your name so I can find you. But for Nicholas, who's concerned about getting that paid, we can connect you with a career karma coach who can actually suit your particular needs a little bit better. So yeah, just reach out to me in the app and I'll make sure to get on that. I appreciate your questions though. So I actually wanted to also talk about what like your favorite things are about like, you know, being a UX engineer on your day-to-day. I know that you were able to like kind of get back to, you know, having your hand a bit into like education and everything. Do you mind just talking about like certain things that you really like about the job, certain things that you'd rather, you know, not do, or how would that look like?
Yeah, so I love my job right now. Basically, when I first graduated from Kenzie, I got hired by an agency, small agency here in Indianapolis we basically do consulting projects for clients. I mentioned Big Brothers Big Sisters was a client. Indiana Pacers was another. Whatever the like hockey team we have, I don't know hockey. They're also a client and so forth. And I really enjoyed my time there. I like consulting because it's very different every day. Like how I said, UX is different depending on like what part of the process you're in. Consulting is different because one day you're working on an app for children and the next day you're working on something that's going on the big screen at the Pacers game. So it's really cool. You get to meet a lot of people and make a lot of connections in the agency world. And I really enjoyed that. For me, I was still left a little bit unfulfilled. And I really I felt like I wasn't really doing my part, I guess I should say, as just like a public servant. So I really wanted to go back to the educational setting. And then pretty much this opportunity came up and it was basically what I prayed for. So I had to take it. So now I teach UX design for Indianapolis public schools through a grant that Kenzie Academy got. And it was really great that they trusted me for this position, definitely because of my background. But now I get to do teaching still. And then on days that I don't teach, I'm doing work for Kenzie, like behind the scenes. So not in a student-facing role, and I'm like still a whole UX engineer doing projects for Kenzie. So it's really great to be able to like have the best of both worlds, I'd say. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's particularly like unique to be able to work for, you know, the people that kind of helped you get those skills. Now you got to use it for them. So that's cool.
Yeah, and it definitely kind of speaks to like how they feel about the program. Like I was in the very first software engineering cohort at Kenzie. So like from day one, when Kenzie was 15 people, like I was there, and like our CEO is there every day. And he really puts his trust into us. And he puts his money where his mouth is, I guess I'd say, because like he, you know, he does very well for me and like really helps me to become a better engineer and just like a better, like, I don't know, like professional, you know, because tech is still new to me. Yeah, it's really great.
So it sounds like that, like Kenzie is kind of like a unique experience in that like there's so much support and to a certain extent like mentorship. How would you compare this to college? And even if there are certain people that kind of just they're kind of on the fence of, or maybe a little skeptical of like, well, I have to dole out so much money for like this whole boot camp. Why can't I just like learn this on my own? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. So especially over the past couple of months, I feel like there's just more and more debate about college versus boot camp. I'm definitely on team college and on team boot camp just because I loved my time in college. I went to an HBCU and then I transferred to a school in Chicago. So I would not trade that for anything. Like it was really great. And I learned a lot from that. My degree is in pre-med with a business minor. Clearly I don't use that now. But the skills that I did take away from like other aspects of college, I also like played volleyball and was an ROTC. So things like that, I couldn't have learned anywhere else, I feel like. But also with the boot camp, I would not trade that for anything. I don't think that I would have gotten the same out of a program such as this had I did it at a university. Especially like with computer science, the barriers to entry are so high, and a lot of people already just feel like they're excluded because they weren't ready when they were 18. But like, who's ready for anything when you're 18? So I definitely think that they both have their place. So really it's just like what's right for you. And then also like with college versus boot camp, I too have a fair amount of student loans from a graduate degree program that I didn't finish. But that was a big worry for me as well. And some of my friends too, because I have a friend who's a graduate who is about 70K in the hole just from undergrad and grad school. But with all that though, kind of keep in mind that like, it's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term reward. When I was a teacher before Kenzie, I was making $30,000 a year, teaching in New Orleans with classes of 46 children and just myself in the room. You've all seen about teachers and like how they should be treated a little better. But when I came to Kenzie, put my life on hold like for that whole year. And then once I graduated, my first job in Indianapolis, it was for $60,000 with insane benefits. So literally like in that year, yeah, I spent a lot of money, but I literally doubled my salary, which like essentially the program like paid for itself like in 1 year's time. You know what I mean? Like I never would have gotten that had I been scared of my debt. And like I said, like in 2 to 4 years, I'm not really going to worry about the extra money that I had to pay because it's still more money than I had a year ago. And then like, I'm 10 times more happy and like fully fulfilled. And like, that's something that like money can't really like compare with. So it's a win-win, I think. Even if lots of money is being spent, it's for something worthy.
Yeah, no, I'm totally in the same camp. I think that there's like an inherent value that people can't really put like a dollar amount to just feeling like great for like you acquired this whole skill set and now you're doing it in service of others in like a way that, you know, speaks to you. And like there are so many people that can't really say the same. And so even being afforded that opportunity in and of itself is like a huge investment, like a great investment. So yeah, I totally agree. So as far as, I guess you did speak on the differences of like the college experience with like a boot camp, but with Kenzie itself, were there anything like in particular that you were just like, you know, shocked by that was just so like out of the ordinary?
I don't know if it's out of the ordinary, but I definitely there was definitely an initial shock of just like the rigor that a boot camp entails. So as you all are doing like research on different boot camps, you'll see some that are like 3 months long, and then you'll see some that are 6 months long, you'll see some that are a year long, and they all generally have the same outcomes. So definitely look at how you think you learn, because for me, I chose Kenzie because it was a longer program, and I knew I needed that time to really like absorb the material, because again, I had no coding knowledge at all, and JavaScript was a doozy for me, and it took a lot of extra hours. So I'd say like I definitely, while it is a longer program, it's still very rigorous. And it's a full-time program. Like you're putting your life on hold for a year, you know, as much as you can. So that it still surprised me like how like intense it was, even though it was a longer program. Not to say that a shorter program will be even more intense. I mean, it probably will. Programs also differ in like their curriculum in different ways. So also like think about that as well. But that definitely was really tough for me at the beginning, just getting used to that. It's a lot of time outside of school.
So how did you like manage to pull through those like really hard times and like that rigor, and you know that because it does take a lot out of you. And I know that actually we had someone on yesterday who's like a career coach for Flatiron. She was kind of showing us this diagram of like the progression of growth, and then like there's this deep valley of like despair and like I'm not good enough, or like all of these different things that are just that come with, you know, challenges, and you kind of doubt yourself. Were there any kind of feelings of that on your end, and like how would you advise others to kind of you know, how would you reframe other people's like thoughts on that?
Yeah, there were definitely feelings of doubt, not just myself, with like most of my classmates as well. I think there was like 1 or 2 people that just knew they had it in the bag from day one. I wish I could be that person, but I also wanted to punch him in the face. I did not, by the way, but it took lots of extra studying time, lots of office hours with my instructors. And it's good that they had them, just because a lot of students were also struggling and like needed these extra repetitions and just like to train our brain to think this way. So we had instructors that were there for us after Kenzie hours. There were also coaches that we have, and I didn't have coaches in my cohort because they didn't have any students above us. So typically it's like people 2 cohorts ahead will also have like coaching hours to help you with basic skills. So you'll have that as well. And then also mentors come to Kenzie for networking events or speaking events. And they're also good to ask for help for job related things. If you get really friendly, you can also ask them some coding questions. But yeah, there's tons of people around to help, and then people on Slack at all hours of the day. I think I've even seen someone ask a question at like 3 a.m. and then they got an answer like 10 minutes later, which is absurd. I'll never do that. But it's really great that like people do. I never felt alone or that like I couldn't swim out of something, because there's always like either someone there or someone that they could refer me to help me succeed at whatever task.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that you kind of got your job kind of almost really near your graduation. Were you applying to jobs like while you were in the program as well, like on top of like all of that? How did that look like?
Yeah, I was. I started applying in January. So I graduated in March of 2019. And all Christmas break, I spent time getting my portfolio together. So like by January 1st, new year, new me, I'm going to apply for new jobs. So that's was kind of my timeline. In that time between January and March, I had a decent amount of first interviews. I had a couple second interviews. I ended up getting 2 job offers. The first job offer that I had was not a personal fit for me. So I kind of just took a leap of faith, since like there was still a month left of school anyway. My way of thinking was like, well, I have a month. If I don't get another job, then I know for next time to accept whatever comes. But if something better comes, like even better. So the second ended up happening. I found a job that was a good fit for me at the time. And I started that actually the same day of graduation. Kenzie loves to tell that story. Like we graduated at 9 a.m. and then my job started at 12. It was actually kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it seems like you really did have that like did everyone else in your cohort like kind of do the same? Were they instructed to do the same, or were you just kind of proactive on that?
It's so people are free to do whatever they want. Like we're all adults. So for me and my cohort, I had my specific goals laid out. I wasn't really concerned with what they were doing, but I started applying in January. And I think in my cohort, I was like one of the first to start applying for jobs on my own, because Kenzie they also help you with the job search. They have employer partners and things like that. And they have people that come in and do interviews like on campus. I didn't wait for any of that. I kind of just started on my own. And I was the only one doing it at the time. That's not a bad thing though. Like if you feel like you're ready, go ahead and do it. If you don't feel like you're ready, you probably are, and you're self-conscious, so you should really start doing it anyway. But yeah, I'd say in terms of graduation, people that I graduated with, there's one person that is continuing his education. Other than that, the other 7 or 6, the other 6 of us are now hired and in jobs that we love. And it's really cool. So once people were ready, they went out and got it. I think the longest it took someone was 3 months after graduation. And then he found something that he really liked in a place that he wanted to be in. He actually ended up moving to St. Louis. So.
Nice. No, that's great. So I think that we're almost nearing the end. And so this is around the time where I like to ask one final question. But before I do so, where can people find you?
Yeah, if anyone like has any more questions that they want to ask, or just say hey, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. My name is Mya Williams, as you see there. I can also link my Twitter in the chat. It's Mya Eliza, and that's also my Instagram. So feel free to find me on there, or find me by my name on LinkedIn. I look just like this on my LinkedIn photo with the hair and all. So it should be pretty easy to find.
Also, I just realized that I had been pronouncing your name totally wrong this whole time. I apologize, but
you know, it's all
Mya,
good. It happens, and I just kind of let it go most of the time.
all right. So to close this off, so the idea behind this question is that there are a ton of people on this chat, right? And I would love it if they had something like tangible, actionable to take away from this particular event, and make progress towards their goal. So what is one thing that people can do this week to move them closer toward their goal of breaking into tech?
I think one really good thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to go out on a coffee date with someone new that you meet in tech. Now, I know we're supposed to be socially distancing, so have coffee over Zoom, okay? I say that just because speaking with someone in tech, like talking with someone who's where you want to be, it will go very far. That is the motivation that I needed. And I've seen it work really well with people in terms of like finding more about the path they want to be in, finding out tips and tricks on like how they got started, and just learning wisdom. So really try to reach out to someone, whether it's on Twitter or LinkedIn, and just ask them to talk for 30 minutes. Tell them what your intentions are. Definitely don't lie about your intentions, because then they'll be upset. But yeah, people will respond and they will be happy to help you 9 times out of 10. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that, so we actually have a discussions forum, which is kind of like a town hall of sorts, where all sorts of members of our Career Karma community can actually get in touch with one another. And there is a perfect platform right there just to like practice, telling your story, because when you reach out to these people, they're going to want to know like a little bit about yourself. And that's going to be a really great way to just practice like that muscle memory of like telling your story and going out and meeting people, even if it is for like virtual Zoom coffees, right? And when you kind of like go through the practice of like, writing out these posts and kind of structuring your thoughts and writing it down, it actually forces you to reflect on what it is that you actually want. And if you don't know that yet, that's even more of a reason to reach out to people and find out like, hey, I'm interested in UX design. I was wondering if, you wanted to talk, and so I could just learn more about it. People are a lot more willing to help than you'd realize. So you heard it here first. Mya suggests everyone here to reach out to someone and try to get one of those coveted coffee chats, coronavirus style. Try to maintain that social distancing. But yeah, I think that is great advice. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And Mya, thank you so much as well for coming on and sharing about your experiences. That's super valuable.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I put all of my information in the chat as well as my email. So feel free to hit me up whenever if you have any questions.
All right, and I'll be sure to take this information as well and put it in on a post within discussions, just so that everyone else can find out as well. If you don't want to lose it, right? So I'll be sure to do that. But thank you all so much again, and until next time, everyone. Good night.
Bye, guys.
Good night.